Welcome back to another episode of the Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and today's guest is lifestyle influencer Alyssa Lynch. Alyssa built a massive online platform sharing her love and passion for health and wellness. Today on the show, she shares what it's really like being an influencer and the difficulties that come along with that. She opens up about her struggles with body obsession, mental health, limiting beliefs, and comparison. We also chat about rebuilding self-worth, her advice to people who consume her content, overcoming setbacks, and more. So let's get this conversation going and welcome Alyssa Lynch to the Adversity Advantage podcast. Alyssa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked.
I'm excited to chat with you. You've come a long way. You've overcome so much adversity in your life, and we're definitely going to dive into different sections of that. But I think a good place for us to start is throughout any moment of adversity. I think what separates people from the people who make it from the people who don't is the people that are able to focus on what they can control and rebuild their self-confidence, rebuild their self-worth, to give them a new perspective and a new level of faith to be able to get through that hard time to continually move forward in life. So what are some of the things, if you had to pick like 3 to 5 things that when you're going through something that's hard, I'm not talking about just having a bad day. I mean, like you're in the thick of like darkness. What are 3 to 5 things that you've leaned on to help you with your self-confidence and self-worth?
First of all, I think I've just always been an extremely empathetic person. I won't lie, sometimes it's default. Like my friends all call me a sponge, so I can like walk into a room and if someone's off, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so much anxiety, gotta go. But there's goods to it too. I feel like I'm a good listener and I'm like really good at learning from other people and their emotions and what they've been through. So I always feel like I can kind of go back and like kind of tap into that when I'm feeling really down, like pull inspiration from other people's stories or what other people have, advice that they've told me. So I think that's one of them. I think another would be, I know it sounds cliche, but the morning routine that I've built has really been beneficial for my life. Just kind of that habit stacking, if like they call it, which started with one simple thing of like, practicing gratitude in the morning. And then it built into this, 20 to 30 minute time for myself to really just let go of any anxieties and tap into like just what's going to make me feel better and kind of like understand how to take the day from there. And I mean, I think that there's so many things within that morning routine that could be points here too, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to establish some sense of structure when you're going through something that's challenging, because sometimes when you're going through it, life is so disorganized. Your emotions, depending on what you're going through, your emotions can be very unstable, and you just really are trying to figure out, like, is there any certainty you might have with anything going on in your life? And the only thing that you can control is your time, like what you do, your actions, and how you choose to take care of yourself. And one of the things that stuck out to me in your story is how, I think it was like 5 years ago, you just moved to LA. You moved to LA essentially to become, it's a dream to become like an actress, right? And then that slowly evolved based on events to becoming an influencer online. But you went through a really traumatic breakup, and then it left you completely heartbroken in the midst of this big city where you had just moved, didn't really know too many people, no family there. Walk the audience through, like, what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind during those early stages of that heartbreak, and what specifically like helped you get out of that moment of darkness?
Yeah, that was a rough time. I mean, I've always been this extremely independent person and kind of this, I don't want anyone to help me, I want to do this myself type of mentality. Probably, some childhood trauma things that made that mentality come about, but I feel like it also worked in my benefit. I was acting in Vancouver. I was doing 3 shows, a couple movies, and was really busy, and that's why those projects would take me out to LA often for press or for further auditions or whatnot. And that's when I moved out, or I came out here one time and I met a boy and I fell in love. And It was this very fairy tale like love that I had never experienced before. And it definitely let some of those I'm independent, don't tell me what to do walls come down. Some for the good, maybe some could have stayed up a little more because I think that, I probably, like, looking back, I was 19, I probably lost certain versions of myself for this relationship. And so when it all came crumbling down and it didn't work out, and I had taken this break from acting, and I now had this following, and the following I had on social media was solely because I was in this relationship. It was this, they're this travel couple, he is a videographer and photographer. So truly my social media platform was just showcasing his work. And throughout that process, I also had started to question my passion for acting and if that was truly the route I wanted to do. There was just a lot of pressure to be a certain way and look a certain way with acting that didn't always sit well with me. So I did want to take some time apart from it. When I went through this breakup, it was not only a heartbreak, but an identity crisis, I think, personally and publicly. Also, I didn't have, because I had let some of those walls down of being this independent girl, I had spent every last penny trying to take care of myself in this relationship that was a much more luxurious lifestyle than I had ever imagined. I mean, I had never even been to a very fancy restaurant before I was in this relationship. I am just from like a smaller suburb in Canada, and our, big night out was the Olive Garden. So I had not really experienced these types of bills that would come after dinner, but I was still in that mindset of like, no one's paying for me. So I ran out of all of my money from my shows very quickly. And then when the relationship ended, it was not only a heartbreak, an identity crisis, but oh crap, I don't know how to take care of myself. And it was so hard, but looking back, the best thing that has ever happened to me, because it really lit something up inside of me, and I really tuned into my passion for wellness, which had always existed. But because I was in this place where I had no further choice but to truly revolve my life around wellness, because my mind and body were struggling so much, I had this platform, and I wasn't, traveling with this amazing videographer anymore. I was like, okay, I'm going to show the real me, the struggles, what I'm doing to help that. And that really resonated with people. And I think that's because it was so authentic to me. And I think that that's what works best on social media for people, is when they're truly just sharing their authentic selves. So that's kind of what I did. And I ended up having a much better experience with social media than I initially thought. I was very against it in the beginning. I said things like, I would never do that as a career. Like, I wouldn't be taken seriously as an actress. I will never hold a camera to my face and like say, hey, what's up, guys? I'm doing this. I was like, no, I will never do that. But look at me now. I can never judge a situation before actually experiencing it, because it's become a really positive job and lifestyle for me.
Yeah, and it's amazing the purpose that can come out of pain, right? And a lot of people, they struggle when they go through a breakup to redefine who they are as a person and to rediscover their true identity. And then also, like you said, like you had this business side of things where you had started to make a little bit of a living, like because of highlighting what your ex-boyfriend had done as a profession, that now you have to figure out like, all right, like how am I going to make this my own, because I can't do this part of the business anymore, so I have to evolve. And I know that this eventually ended up taking a slight turn for the worst, in that I've heard you talk about that you became so obsessive with the way you looked and the validation that you got from that, that it ended up becoming detrimental to your health. So if you could walk the listeners through that process and maybe like get as specific as you can, like what would go through your mind when you would think about like losing more weight? Were you aware of what was going on and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I've obviously gone through this in my head so many times, and I just think it's a lot of the time people think of it quite black and white, and I just think there's so many different parts and moving parts to kind of going through something that might be like an eating disorder or just body dysmorphia or anxiety or whatever it may be. I think the before I went through that breakup, I was already struggling and not as maybe aware of it with, food and like properly nourishing my body and the pressure I felt to stay thin. I think that probably came about quite early on in my life. And then with acting and, a little bit of like modeling, I didn't really do much of that, but just being in those communities made me probably feel the need to have some unhealthy habits. So, yeah, I think that it probably started before the breakup, and then when the breakup happened, it just caused me to have so much anxiety that I needed to control something. So I wouldn't say the mindset process at that time in my life was I need to be thin. I need to be thin. I actually would look in the mirror and be like, Alyssa, you are so thin. Like, you poor thing. But it wasn't something I felt strong enough to do anything about because I just felt like I had no control in my life. I didn't know if I could stay in the US because I was, I'm from Canada and I was working on my visa. So that caused me anxiety every day because this is where I wanted to be. I didn't know if I'd be able to pay my rent. I didn't know if I was doing the right career and on the right path. And then, certain health things started to happen because of all this. I wasn't sleeping. I felt an immense amount of anxiety. I lost my period. So many things started to happen and I just felt so not in control. So for some reason in my non-logical mind, I was like, the only thing I can control and feel like I'm controlling is my food and my working out, and it was just a very unhealthy process. But I think that the journey of that entire unhealthy relationship probably actually started from a lot younger than I thought.
Well, let's go back a little bit and then we'll come back to how you healed this part because it seems that you mentioned that you were a sponge for people's energy and you took on people's energy and that you felt like you needed to be independent. Seems like you were looking for love in all the wrong places. And I know that a lot of these are symptoms, can be symptoms of growing up in a traumatic environment. And I know that you grew up with your dad who was an addict. So if you could just walk the audience through like what that was like for you as a kid, and then maybe just to the best of your ability, talk about how that impacted your adult relationships and the way you felt about yourself, and then also like how you have healed that relationship with him so that you can have healthier adult relationships.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm in therapy every week, and I feel like therapists and people always like to pull up childhood because a lot of the traumas and things that we go through as adults, start from that place. And it's tough because we try and dig deep, but to be honest, it's hard to find a lot of things, even though it can sound like, oh, when I say, oh, yeah, my dad was an addict, it's like, oh, whoa, like that's probably where the trauma starts. But just to give you a little insight, my mom and dad had me in high school. So I was definitely not planned. My mom got pregnant at 16, super young. And I lived in my family's house with my grandparents, my aunt, and my mom. And it was the best childhood, like imaginable. Like I had, my mom is like, every time I'm like working through childhood trauma and like also hearing about other people's, I feel like it's talked about a lot on podcasts and stuff too. And I just text her every time after and I'm like, how the frick did you do it? 16 years old, and like between her and I, no trauma whatsoever. She's the best. And my grandparents were the best. And honestly, my childhood was amazing. However, my dad did really struggle. He struggled with alcohol and drug abuse. He's sober now and he's thriving. But yeah, it was always kind of a question mark if, dad was going to be around or not. And I also think there was a sense of hopping around. My mom and I tried to live on our own a couple times, but then we would always have to like come back to my grandparents' house. And sometimes I was at my dad's house, and sometimes I was at my mom's. And, my mom was so young, so I would have to like get a ride to school from the neighbor. And like there was a lot of bouncing around. So my therapist and I have kind of come to the conclusion that maybe there was just not enough of that like safe home feeling because there was so many like moving parts and people a part of my immediate family as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of people end up trying to point back to childhood with things because I think for a lot of people that is kind of where it starts. However, everybody is raised differently in the context of childhood. And if, it seems like your memories mostly are positive from your childhood, where a lot of times it can be the reverse, right? For many people that they grow up with a parent who is addicted to drugs, and like kudos to your parents for, kind of what they did and how when they had you at your mom had you at such a young age that you guys have such an amazing relationship together. I
Yeah,
think it's
I mean,
awesome.
I say this too as my friends are starting to have kids. I don't have children, so I can't give advice on that part, but I'm so like adamant about not hiding things from your children. And I think that that's something that my mom did so beautifully. Was maybe it was her, innocent mind because she was so young, but she was just constantly like, look, I'm not hiding anything from you. Like, your dad's kind of dumb and he's not doing good things. And like, she would explain it to me and I'm like 4 and I'm like, oh, okay. But it was kind of always like, we're in this together. Life isn't perfect. We're not perfect. And like, we have each other. So it's good. And I hear so much about these parents and families trying to kind of be perfect and then kind of sweeping a lot of things under the rug. And I think that that can cause a lot more trauma than people think.
Yeah, I mean, keeping secrets, sweeping things under the rug, not talking about your feelings and emotions, yeah, it can certainly cause some trauma and some unhealthy patterns as people get older. So would you say like, watching what your dad went through and even everything he's overcome, is that like your main motivation for being so passionate about mental health, or is it more about some of the stuff you struggled with?
It's interesting too, because even though my dad obviously dealt with more mental health issues, it was actually, I've always been a very emotional person, and my family actually isn't very emotional, except for my dad. That's kind of something that my dad and I really bonded on, was similar empathetic feelings and, dealing with anger or sad days or anxious days. Like, my family is just like, what's depression? What's anxiety? I don't know. So as much as I feel like I honestly helped me, it helped me feel seen and it helped me feel understood from him. It also definitely drilled something into my brain to not do drugs and to really steer away from that, because I got to witness how detrimental that was to someone's life. So I've really always never had an inclination to do that. So that's a positive. But yeah, I think that I've just always had a lot of emotions and I've never really known how exactly to deal with them. So I think honestly that has been something that's always kind of pushed me to be more passionate and learn about mental health.
Yeah, and it's so important to not only like learn about your own mental health, but to help spread awareness around the subject of mental health, because there are so many people that are struggling. And we're going to get into like how we can help maybe inspire other people later on, but I want to go back to your personal journey. And you're in this place where you're now having an unhealthy relationship, I guess, with your body. You're still healing from a pretty rough breakup that you went through. You're still trying to figure some stuff out as far as how you're managing your own brand and everything. What was that healing process like for you to get to a place where you were comfortable and having a healthy relationship with exercise and nutrition and your body so that you could move past all that?
Well, I've actually never really said this like out loud at all, but the turning point for me was my best friend at the time of like 6 years. She had told me that she needed to distance herself from me because she also struggled with body and eating issues. And she said in order for her to heal, she had to distance herself from me because it was triggering to be around me. And that was the breaking point for me to be like, it was just a wake up call for me to be like, oh my gosh, like I'm taking my control out on something that's not only affecting me, but it's affecting the people around me. And I need to make some change in my life. And then I went through a process of having a hard time differentiating what were unhealthy habits and what were healthy, because I always loved health and wellness, but it became an obsessive interest. And I knew all of this information, but I wasn't doing any of it. And I was kind of a hypocrite. And it took me knowing, like, oh, wait, I can still go and move my body and work out. Like, I can do that. That's okay. I want to do that. That's not my illness telling me, you got to get skinny. You got to get skinny. So there was a lot of like mental work, journaling, meditations that I needed to do to figure out, like, what am I doing because I love my body and what am I doing because I'm punishing my body? And so that took, 2 years to truly like get into a rhythm of being like, okay, I'm confident that I'm doing this because I'm, rewarding my body, or I love my body, whatever it is, or because this just truly makes me feel good and this is good for my body. I feel like it takes a while to also get that intuitive sense and connection to your body back after being so disconnected from it. And so after, about 2 years of doing that, I was able to like make healthy choices.
That's awesome. I mean, I can't imagine how hard it must have been given that you're still like in that profession where your paycheck, your livelihood, the success of your brand is based on whether people like engage with you and whether people like you and your self-image in a way, right? That in many cases drives, revenue for you to keep your bills being paid. How do you gauge success with that now? Like, how do you separate all that? Because I think it's pretty easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah. And looking back, I don't ask myself why I did the things I did. I think it's pretty unfortunate that I was in a place where I felt like if I was a smaller size that I would gain more success. And I don't think in all of the situations I was in that was the case for some situations, which is sad. So I try not to like dwell on that past, but I think for me, whether it's just kind of honestly looks and surface level things and situations, I get really freaking tired of vanity. Like, it's hard doing this job sometimes for me because I want an intention and a fulfillment from every single thing. And, sometimes like making your morning smoothie for a brand, there's not always like this, oh, wow, I'm helping others. And like, so I have to sometimes like be okay with little bits of vanity, like, hey guys, look at the lip gloss I'm using. But I also have really like tuned into why I'm doing this and what people are. I just always look at myself from like the outside of the glass, and I'm like looking in and I'm inside the glass. And I always think about how other people would feel or how I would feel if I was watching someone's content that was mine. And that's why I feel like even going, I just went on this trip to Aspen with Aloe, and it was for fashion, it was for their clothes. So yeah, I could have just gone to this beautiful hotel, done all of these luxury dinners that are, sometimes quite out of reach for other people. And, I should be enjoying that whole experience. And don't get me wrong, I really, really did. But there was points where I was just like, ugh, I don't know how I would feel about like watching this. Like, would I feel like bad that I'm like sitting at my desk and like can't afford a trip? And so taking a situation like that and turning it into like, I truly did feel very creatively stuck the week before that trip. So I decided to do like a whole kind of like manifesting journal session where I was like, what do I want to feel and what opportunities do I want to come my way in this job? And that was new connections with different people, because I felt myself being around the same people, which is great, but I like different challenging situations. And so I was like, new people, a new environment, and I want to also have time in whatever experience that comes to connect to myself more. And then, a couple days later, I got an offer to go to Aspen with a group of people that I didn't know, some that I didn't know, a new place I had never been, and there was yoga and free time. And so I made the narrative, or I was able to share a narrative of like, try and manifest what you want to call into your life, because you never know like the opportunity that could come from that. And so switching something from, oh, here's the link to the jacket I'm wearing, to that makes me feel like I'm actually able to show up and like be of service to someone or give something to someone else, because that's the type of content that inspires me, that I admire, and that is the reason I do what I do. If that didn't exist, then like I probably couldn't do this job.
Yeah, you have to have intention, you have to have purpose, and you have to have meaning, I think, in whatever you're doing. Otherwise, the success and the validation becomes fleeting, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I would imagine that there's a lot of girls that follow you on social media. And I think I was reading stats that like, I think teenage girls' mental health is like gone through the roof as far as problems. And there's a lot of people that might look at somebody like yourself and they're like, oh, I need to do like these wellness hacks. I need to do this to my body. I need to like live this lifestyle for me to be happy. And I think that they end up like formulating in their mind what success and what happiness like looks like. Like, what's your advice to like the consumer who is perusing through your page to be able to consume it in a way that's healthy?
Well, that's why I too like, don't get me wrong, I like to share all the weird like wellness treatments that I try in LA, because I never thought I would ever have access to those. And I just am so curious. I'm a very curious person. So it's like I like to be a guinea pig for certain things, whether it's, like the most bougie lymphatic drainage massage you can get, or the most bougie gym that you can do a personal training session at. Like I just want to try. But I always say, you do not need to do these things to be healthy. And I always emphasize the most important things are truly free. And that's like water, looking out into the sun when you wake up, and like practicing gratitude. And like those don't cost any money. You can do those wherever you are, unless it's like Vancouver and really dark where you live, but like try and find some type of light. And I always try and emphasize those things at like while I'm doing the other fun things too. Because I also think you can't live like when you're in this career, you can't live with the mindset of being sensitive to everyone's feelings, or else, we couldn't post anything. And we live in this cancel culture today. And I'm just like, sometimes, I told you, I'm very sensitive to the way my content's going to make other people feel. However, I can't dissect it to the point of like, is this going to trigger someone? Because I'm like, well, anything could trigger anyone. So I think there's a balance with that. But even the other day, I was linking all my favorite Black Friday sales. And because I was honestly doing shopping. So I was just linking what I was finding. But then in the middle of it all, I just took a break and I said, by the way, none of this shit matters at all. It's all things. You do not need to buy one thing today. But if you are shopping, I want to help you save your money. And that is why I'm sharing this. But like, it doesn't matter. And I try and say things like that so that people don't get stuck in this mindset of like, oh, I need that, or I need to look this way. Sometimes people need a little, like, that's why I wish almost TikTok had these like breaks if you're scrolling too much, to be like, you're beautiful, stop second guessing yourself, and like get off your phone and go put your feet in the grass or something like that. I know it's corny, but it's true. Like, we need those reminders with the fast pace of our like world today.
Yeah, and I think now people are spending so much time on social media that they begin to almost associate that with reality. Where, like, to me, influencers or even some of the stuff that I do with brands, it's like the new way of like TV commercials where brands are paying you to advertise for them for a period of time for a post or whatever. But people aren't glued to the TV anymore and watching commercials. So what they see on TV, they're not like identifying as much with personality they might see on social media, right? So I think it's important to pay attention to how much time you're spending on the screen, and then also like read the caption of the full content. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because you could see a picture of something, but if you don't read what the picture is about and you just scroll, you might just get an image in your head, and you then will begin to articulate some thought or idea around that, instead of like reading like, hey, like this is what I did. I'm only doing this procedure because I like to try new things. I highly recommend not doing it.
Yeah.
Just drink more water, or whatever the case may be, right? And speaking of being afraid to share certain things, I saw you made like a TikTok the other day, I think, and it was about limiting beliefs. And so I want to use this podcast as a way to help keep you accountable. What are a few limiting beliefs you're having maybe right now, or you've had recently, of content that you're wanting to talk more about that you're not going to? And what are some things you're going to talk about more of in the new year?
The first one I think would be that, like, a limiting belief would be that I'm not really business savvy, because I grew up going to an art school, and it was kind of always just like, all right, Alyssa, you stick to the performing arts. You stick to the performing arts. The academic stuff was never truly my thing. But I think the thing that drew me more to the social media world versus the acting world was actually because I enjoyed certain business aspects and lifestyle and like creating something. And I, still catch myself being like, oh, well, that's not me. I'm just like the creative, performing, more talent side of things. And I do want to change that. And it doesn't mean that I need to, sit in board meetings all day and talk about NFTs and Bitcoin, because I could actually peel my eyes out if that were to happen. But I think it's believing in myself enough to take myself seriously to, have that business side to myself, and to possibly create, whether it's a product or an app or a brand in the future. So that's something that I want to just tap into more. On the sharing side of things, I have always held back with sharing, beauty and fashion content. And it's actually something that I really like. I don't think I'm the best at it at all. At all. I live with my boyfriend, who is a designer and a style king. So sometimes I'm just like, I'm in yoga pants for the 5th day in a row, and you got a cool outfit on, so I'm not worthy of being this like fashion girl. But that's just a limiting belief, because I'm like, no, I could still share my outfit and people could like it or they couldn't, but it doesn't matter because I enjoy it. So that's kind of my mindset going into the new year.
Yeah, it's a good mindset to have. And I think just being able to identify those limiting beliefs and identify things that you're holding yourself back from doing, I think is just a great first step. And then figuring out a way to talk more about it. All right, so I'm going to hold you accountable to sharing more content on fashion and beauty stuff, and then also just not being afraid to talk about that, what you're doing as far as some business stuff. Getting back to things that have maybe been limiting you, you talked about like how you were lacking creativity not too long ago. And then I also saw you posted something that this past year has been quite challenging for you. Like, what's been hard for you this year and how have you overcome it?
My boyfriend's very vocal about this. He's talked about it, but he struggles a lot with his mental health. And this year was a rough one for him. And like I said, I'm a sponge. So I definitely take in the feelings of the people I love, especially. And so trying to be strong when there's probably a lot of things personally that I needed to work on, but those were on the back burner because I was thinking too much about the people that I love. I grew another sense of like loss for myself and my own needs. And I also just, when you push emotions down, they're going to come up worse. So I think that happened at certain periods of this year. And so I feel like now I can sit here and say with confidence that I don't want to push anything down anymore, and I want to make my own feelings my priority.
Yeah, it's important, right? And I think if you said you grew up in a way where you didn't really talk about stuff a lot, right? That's going to become your normal. And I think it's really admirable that you've been able to identify all of this, to remain in therapy, be there for your boyfriend as needed, but then also be able to understand where when you're almost giving too much and it's becoming detrimental to your own mental health, and being able to refill your own cup too.
Yeah, because then it doesn't help you, and it also doesn't help anyone else. You might think it's helping other people, but if you don't help yourself, then you can't be of service to anyone else either.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's the old adage of like you got to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? It's really
Yes,
true. It's
it's
so
so
true.
true. I've literally been putting on everybody else's oxygen mask and just hyperventilating on my own for the last year, so it's time that I'm a little selfish.
Yeah, you got to keep the oxygen mask on. And I think one of the times where you really have to nourish yourself a bit is when you're experiencing FOMO and comparison, and you've been in the branding online world for quite a bit now, and there's so much more competition now. I mean, influencers are popping up left and right. Like every day I see 5 new ones, right? What's your relationship like with like FOMO and the comparison trap? And like, do you struggle with that at all? And if so, like, how do you mitigate that on days where it's getting to you?
I don't struggle too much with FOMO. I think because I've always felt a little different in, my childhood, feeling like the emotional one, and then moving to LA, not being a party person, and a lot of people around me being party people. And there was no, even like in those situations, like fake it till you make it, or I'm gonna go do it to please other people. Like that was something that I had always been very true to myself. Like I do not feel good staying out late, being in those atmospheres. There's too much energy and I need to go home. So I think I've always been pretty good with FOMO because of that, just because I know myself and I've missed out on so much of that stuff anyways, that I just can tune into like what I need. But comparison for sure. Not even just with looks, obviously that too. I think it's just hard in this day and age, but also with, yeah, what's going viral and businesses. And because it's like your identity is truly like your business. And in the beginning, I remember nobody in my community that did the same job as me would talk about, the views and the rates and all of that stuff. And then now that a lot of other people are doing it, that conversation is kind of being opened up and people are talking about that because we're also realizing, oh wait, like this is a business. I don't want likes for attention. I want likes because then I can send it over to the brand and they can book me and like we can work together. So that was a weird transition. It still is. It's just like a weird, money's a weird topic. To put that with your worth, it's a weird topic. And so, yeah, I definitely struggle with that. But I will say, I am so, so blessed with the friendships I've made in this space. My best friends, they do the same job as me. And I will say I lucked out because there is not 1 ounce of comparison, like at all. It is just, we're each other's biggest fans. Even if an outsider that, maybe just were to look at our platforms for a couple of minutes, if they didn't see much difference, there's a lot of individuality in between all of us. And there's the focus points for all of us are very different, but we're still able to help one another out. And I think that that's allowed me to just take inspiration and have admiration for them, but also stay in my lane and try and be true to myself.
Yeah, and it's good that we were talking about this because things have changed, right? Where brands, in my understanding, aren't just giving deals to people with a big platform. They're looking like at engagement. They're looking at like how real your audience is, like where your audience is, like are you selling stuff, especially as we've had some economic troubles here recently, like brands have been cutting budgets, right? They're not spending as much, right? They're not willing to take as big of a risk because they need that ROI to come back. So I've experienced it even with what I do. So it's good to be talking about this stuff because this is reality. Like this is the world that you live in. This is the world that many people live in. And I think it's important to talk about.
I told my family, I'm like, y'all are getting hugs for Christmas this year. Scary time.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, it is just it's strange and it's uncomfortable. A lot of the time it's uncomfortable and I'm very grateful that I have a team, a management team that can kind of deal with that stuff because it's uncomfortable when you're also doing it yourself.
And so I think I want to talk about this because I think this is something that people talk about or that people deal with a lot, whether or not they're in this space or not. And that is like, how do you not sell out? How do you not sell your soul just to gain attention or gain money when you're at a place where you need to make more money, you need to get more attention? What are some things that you tend to come back to? Like, is it journaling? Is it meditation where you're tempted to maybe do something for money that isn't in alignment with who you are? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, I've done that. I've been through a stage of saying yes to everything. Not gonna lie, I did a Wendy's campaign. Very off brand. Very off brand. I think it's been enough years where I can like legally say that.
Was it with a,
And
was it, tell me it was for a Frosty at least.
it was for a juice.
Oh,
So at
okay.
least that. You
Yeah.
know, I made sense of that because I was like hardcore vegan at the time too. And I was like, listen, if it's the chicken nuggets, like we can't do it. But they were like, no, it's just a really sugary juice. And I was like, I can make it work. But I was also just in that stage of like, I have $0 to my name. I have this platform. I'm saying yes to everything. However, I will say it put money in the bank for that period of time. But I think it actually hindered the amount of money I could have made in the near future. Because to anyone listening that is kind of in this state right now, I think it's really important to really ask yourself, do I really want to say yes to this? Because your following starts to not trust you because of it's just so apparent when someone is promoting something or doing something that's out of alignment with themselves. And I also, a lot of the time, think less is more. Like my passion, I know I'm in the right career because my passion is truly telling people what I'm passionate about. I've done it since I was little. I do it all the time for non-sponsored, no ad. Like that's what I love to do. This book, this lip gloss, this protein, this like supplement, whatever it is. And so I think organically sharing all of that and then like those brands that you're organically sharing, those should be the brands that start to pay you at a certain point because you've already organically shared them. And I think that that's the most beneficial thing that I've learned to do and that I want to stick to doing, because a random brand that reaches out to me that I've never heard of or I've never posted about or talked about, I probably shouldn't be working with them.
It's true. Or I think you should. It's super important to make a disclaimer, disclose that it is like a paid ad, and that you haven't tested the product yet. You really don't know what's going to turn out. But if you want to learn more about it, you can like go check out their product. But yeah, there's a big difference between that, I think, and you like being like, I love this product, and you've never tried
Yeah.
it.
No, now if it's a brand I've never heard of, I ask for at least a 3-month trial period and I try it out for 3 months. And then at the end of the 3 months, I say, yes, I'd like to work together or no.
Right. And that's important, I think, because like the only thing in life that I think is something that can get you through hard times that can personally and professionally, or one of the only things I should say, is your integrity. And once you lose that, it's really hard to get it back, if not impossible, depending on what you do and who you've lost it with and stuff like that. I want to talk about anxiety because I know that you've had your struggles with anxiety off and on, and uncertainty, and dealing with all of that. Like, what's it like for you now? I mean, do you still struggle with it? And what are some of your daily practices that help you manage your anxiety?
Yeah, unfortunately, I still struggle with it. And I definitely think my morning routine, the habit stacking, and those little habits, there are also habits that I do throughout the day. Those really help. And those are, like I said, practicing gratitude. I also think meditation, and meditation in any form of what that means. It can be a walking meditation, it can just be like focusing on your breath and taking a few deep breaths. It can be a meditation you're following. It can be like a yoga meditation where you're kind of moving your body. Like, I just think getting quiet with yourself and your breath is so important. And like breath work and cold plunges or ice cold showers are something that, I mean, work better than any type of, natural or medication that I've ever tried, which I think says a lot. So those I would just suggest to anyone. If you don't have access to a cold plunge or an ice bath, a cold shower. My dad now, new person because of the cold shower situation. And I'm like, who would have thought? Who would have thought drinking more water and getting an ice cold water could help? It probably puts my anxiety down at least 50%, which I think is great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, definitely cold exposure is definitely like a game changer as far as, in my experience, the way it's helped me is it gets me used to doing something that just sucks. And it just helps me embrace like challenges more, and it helps build self-confidence, because when you first get into the cold plunge or you take a cold shower, I mean, you might only last a few seconds, right? In there before you want to get out. And then that progresses to maybe 30 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes, and then you might get to a point where you're in there for like 3 or 5 minutes or something like that, and you're like, how the heck did I do this? And it all started with just a few
And when
seconds.
you're immersed in that cold plunge or ice bath, you can't last in there unless you are saying positive affirmations to yourself. When I'm truly doing it and I'm like, okay, we're going for at least 3 minutes here, the things I'm saying to myself are, I am capable, you can do this, you're calm, you're sitting here, you're amazing, you can do it, you're capable. Like those things over and over and over again. Just doing those anyways, it's hard for us to sit down when we're like chill. We got our phones right here, the TV's right there, the pantry's right there. Like it's hard for us to truly sit and focus on meaning those things and feeling it in our bodies. But when we're in that shock system, it's almost like this, I will die if I don't say these things and calm my body. And it leaves you, when you walk out of there, you're like, frick yeah, I'm capable. Like I can do all these things. Like my anxiety will not get the best of me today?
For sure. And I think one of the other things that has helped you, it seems, with your anxiety, overcoming adversity, getting better at embracing challenge, is fitness. And I know things have come full circle to where now you have a healthier relationship with your body. Like, what's your wellness routine like now?
I mean, I don't discriminate against workouts. I love them all. I weight train 2 days a week, Pilates twice a week, and yoga once or twice a week. And I also walk a lot, listen to a lot of podcasts, do a lot of walks. I move my body every single day. I don't take a day off from moving my body, actually, but that doesn't mean that I'm working like I'm, hitting the gym hard every single day. I'm giving my muscles a rest, but I don't ever feel the need to just like lay in bed or sit at the computer for one day because I'm sore. It's like, no, let's stretch, let's go on a walk. And whenever I'm feeling anxious or down, I know I need to move my body. And the moment I finish that, whatever form of movement it is, I feel like I can take a full deep breath.
I mean, I think exercise is one of the best forms of stress management and helping with anxiety, tools for helping with anxiety that there is, because like you said, like once you get done doing that thing, moving your body, you feel like you can just like breathe, and you have this sense of calmness that you didn't have before. So the last question I have for you is, there's a lot of people that listen to my show that they just experience so much hardship, heartache. Maybe they've just gone through a breakup, or maybe they just had a really bad year and they're trying to move that in the past and move forward. I know you've had some experience with this. What are a few things that you think somebody should do? Like if you were in that position where you were looking to use 2023 as a fresh start and to leave 2022 behind, what would be a few things that you would make sure you would do?
Well, I don't know if you've heard of this book, but I just started reading this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Read this book. Number one, it's really good. It's amazing. And so many of the people I admire in my life have said that this is, what changed their mindset and their life. And there's different exercises in the book that you can do as well that honestly, I think this has been more beneficial for me than years of therapy. So that's saying something. But yeah, I think it would be start with one healthy habit. Maybe it's you start with one a week and you try and do that for a week and then you add one more the next week. I think it's not like having to change your life around and be like, okay, I can't eat fast food anymore. I can't have negative mindset. I need to start working out. I need to meditate every day. That's like just an overwhelming load of things that could overwhelm you so much that you one day throw your hands up in the air like third day in and you're like, screw it, I'm going back to all my unhealthy habits. So I would just honestly say, like, pick one thing that you know is going to make you feel so good. And maybe that's not being on your phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. And instead you're taking time for you, even if it's just making a coffee and like sitting there. And so that would be my like main piece of advice when, going through hardship, because I think as you start to stack those habits, those healthy habits, I mean, the way you start your day is like what sets you up for your life, I think. So doing that right in the morning, I think can completely change your life.
Absolutely. And I think it's always good to start off the year with a new book that can help move you forward in a different direction. So I think that's a great piece of advice. And then also, mastering your mornings is so important, and making sure, like I know you've touched on this, like habit stacking and making sure that you own that part of your day so that you set yourself up for success. So Alyssa, this has been amazing. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate you opening up and sharing about stuff that you don't typically share and talk about. And if people want to follow along your journey, they want to connect with you more, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you so much too. You can find me at Alyssa Lynch on pretty much every platform.
Sweet. Well, I'll make sure to include the links to your socials in the show notes. And for those listening, what I invite you to do is to share a takeaway. Maybe it was something that Alyssa said about how she's overcome adversity in her life. Maybe it was something that she said about her personal journey and how she grew up. Maybe it was something that she said about how she overcame and healed from the breakup years ago. Maybe it was something Alyssa said about how she's healed the relationship with her body, or some of the limiting beliefs that she shared, or even more recently about how she talked about how you can start 2023 off on the right foot. Whatever it was, share your takeaway, tag Alyssa, tag myself, because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.